Welcome to part 86 of VHS Identity Blender 2.7. In this video, we'll be talking about the Mesh Deform Modifier. We'll be talking about what it is and why you would want to use it, and how to set it up, and a few different ways you can use it to make your character rigging really great by adding squash and stretch to your characters. And especially, you can add more facial features and facial exaggerations by adding more bones and making more squash and stretch points anytime you like. You would have seen the results of this in any modern 3D animated movie where you see characters' faces with really different expressions, really stretched faces, and really funny kind of facial expressions and poses that you would not get if you just set up a face rig with an armature using shape keys. But with the Mesh Deform Modifier, you can add more to your facial expressions to really make your character's performance stand out. So let's go ahead and jump in. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button below this video on YouTube. If you want to see more videos like this one in Blender and in Tech, click on that subscribe button as well. To start this video off, I have a file that you can go ahead and download from the description area below this video on YouTube. The file is, of course, the character file that I have on the screen right now. It's a very simple, low-poly character that I just modeled in about 5 minutes. It also has an armature, a bone structure, inside of the character, but that bone structure is not linked up. It does not yet control the position and bending of the arms and legs and head and neck, but we will be doing that in this video. So go ahead, get that file. Let's go ahead and rig this character and give him some good squash and stretch facial features. By the way, in this video, I'm going to be assuming that you understand the basics of how to add an armature and work with bones with a mesh. If you don't, I'll put a link on the screen right now. I have a whole mini-series as a part of this big 2.7 Blender tutorial series in which I create a rigged Minecraft character complete with a face rig in it so you can control facial expressions. So I'll put a link to that on the screen right now. What I need to do now is not parent the mesh of the character to the armature. That's what you would do before. We're going to do it in an alternate method. What we're going to do is we're going to add another outside shell that's going to be using the Mesh Deform Modifier, or it'll be the object that the Mesh Deform Modifier points to, this outer shell. It'll tell the person's character mesh how to deform, and this outer shell will be the object that is controlled by the bones directly, but then our character mesh will be controlled by the outer shell. So I'm going to press Shift S to put my 3D cursor back to the center of my scene, and I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to add a mesh cube. It's too small, so I'm going to scale it a little bit up. And we're going to subdivide it smooth, but much more low poly here. So I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and then I'll press W and subdivide smooth. And maybe I'll do 3. That looks pretty good, but it's too big, so I'm going to tap S. What we want here is an outer shell that's just a little bit of ways, but always outside of, always encompassing the entire character mesh, or you could do just the head. It's really up to you. So I've got this outer mesh, and if I want to see the character through it, I can go up to the Object tab, and I can change the maximum draw type under the groups, or actually under the display section, to wire. And that means that this outer shell mesh will never display as more than a wire in my 3D viewport window in Blender. This outer shell mesh is going to have to be bigger than the entire mesh. So I'm going to do a little bit of playing. I'm going to scale up those two faces that are near the nose. I'm going to extrude out like that, and we scale it down a little bit so we have kind of a cage around the nose. Let's go ahead and select these for faces. I'm going to move them up a little bit, and maybe I'm going to tap S and Z to flatten that out a little bit, just because I want to get a bit of a neck there, and then SZ, 0, enter. And I'm going to tap E and extrude that down. And I'm going to press Control R to make a loop cut and right click so that I'm getting some geometry around there. And I'm going to select all 4 side faces, and then E. Let's bring it out to right about there, and I'll get those 4, and E, and I'll bring it right out to about there. Try to be consistent for the most part. Let's grab all the bottom faces. In fact, I'll just tap C so I can get them all. I can't quite see them all, but I'm going to believe that works. That works. E, and then extrude that down. So now I've got a cage around the body. I do need to make a cage around, in this case, the arms. So I'm going to just extrude out, and I do want to give myself some more geometry around the elbows, because this shell mesh will need to bend just like the arms if I want the arms to be able to bend too. So I'm going to go to about there, E, and then go there, and then E again, and then E, and go all the way out. You'll need at least 3 edge loops, just like I had on the original mesh as well. Let's go ahead and select the other side now, and do the same exact thing. So E, and go to about there, E, and to right about there. So now I've got, I'll press tab, a shell around my character and the armature. I want to make sure that things are a little bit away from the original mesh, so that it's giving me some room, but it isn't too far away here. What I have to do now is I want to parent the outer shell mesh. I'm going to actually name this object Deform Mesh, and I'll press enter. And I'm going to hold shift with it selected and right click on the armature. Actually, I just selected the wrong thing. So I'm going to select the outer mesh first, hold shift, select the bone. And if your bone's in pose mode, that's okay. If it's in object mode, that's okay. It doesn't matter. And I can press Control P. And this is what you'll recognize if you understand how to use bones. You'll select from the Set Parent To menu, which is, again, Control P. You're going to select with automatic weights. So this is a bit backwards because we're not actually applying with automatic weights to the actual character mesh. We're applying it, I just clicked there, to the outer shell. So now, if I select my armature, and I go into pose mode, I can animate the outer shell and not the actual character. Why? Because now this is where the magic happens. This is where we get to actually use the Mesh Deform modifier. If I select my character mesh and go to the Wrench tab, of course I've already got a subsurf modifier, but I'm going to add another modifier. This is the new one. It's called Mesh Deform. And when I select it, it needs me to specify one thing: the object that it's going to use as a cage to transform itself. So I'm going to use this little eyedropper, and I'm going to click. You'll see it's wanting me to select the object Deform Mesh, and that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to click on it, and in order for this to work, I have to press bind. And depending on the precision that you want, its default is 5. Bind will take a couple of seconds or several seconds. It might actually say that Blender hasn't stopped responding on your computer. At least give it some time. Let it not say that anymore. It should work, but I'm going to go ahead now and click bind. And that was really quick. I didn't have to pause the video at all. That's literally how quick it was on my computer. So now if I rotate the head, it's not just going to transform the outer shell, it's also going to transform the head. And so that works pretty good. It's actually making the character move. So why would I want to do this? Why would I want to have this outer extra shell object make my actual skin move? Well, there's a few reasons. Let's go over the first. I'm going to go ahead now and add a second armature to my scene. So I'm going to press Shift A. And I'm going to add an armature. Actually, I can't do that with a mesh with the armature selected. I guess you can't add a second armature when you have an armature selected in pose mode at least. So I'm going to select the outer shell. I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to add an armature single bone. This is a new armature object. It's right there. It's not part of the first armature. This is a whole second new one. And I'm going to make sure X-ray is turned on. Again, under the little person tab, under display, X-ray. This is going to be a second armature to control the squash and stretch of the face. So this armature, I actually do not want it to ever control the mesh or really anything using the normal with automatic weights. We're going to be using what are called weight or bone envelopes. And that's because actually if you try to use weights with another mesh, an armature that also uses bone weights, you're going to get lots of problems. So I figured out how to do it in a different way. So this bone is actually going to be controlling one eyebrow, and we're going to have another bone controlling another eyebrow. You could put a bone on every side of the head to squash and stretch the head. We're just going to have three, one for the tip of the nose and one for each eyebrow, just to make our face have some contortions to it. So with this smaller bone, I'm going to press tab. I'm going to go into edit mode by pressing tab, and I'm going to move that bone up to right there. I'll make it a little bit shorter by grabbing the tail and moving it down. I'll go to my side view, move the entire bone back, and I'm going to duplicate that bone, Shift D, and I'll tap X to move it, or the copy, over to right about there. And let's duplicate that bone, Shift D, put it right on the nose. From my side view, I'll move it up. And what I'm going to do now is go back into object mode and parent this entire armature to the head bone. And so I'm in pose mode of the head bone of the entire larger armature. And I'm in object mode of the face armature. In fact, I'm going to name this armature face rig, and I'll tap enter under that little person tab. I'm going to have it selected, hold shift, select the head bone in pose mode, and control P, and I'm going to parent the face whole armature to the single bone in pose mode of the head. Okay, so I'll select bone here, and that should be okay. So now I can select something else and select just that head bone, and nothing much would have changed. But now I have these secondary bones that I want to control the same shell mesh. And so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to select the bones and select the shell mesh and press Control P again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this outer mesh, and I'm going to add the armature modifier manually. When you normally select the mesh and the bones and press Command P and to automatic weights, it adds this armature modifier, but I'm going to add a second one just manually. So add modifier, where is it? Armature right there. It's at the top of Deform. I'm going to select the second armature, which in this case is, I guess I named the armature, but not the object. So face rig with a capital R and an F. Apparently I can't use the keyboard right now. And what I'm going to do here is, with the shell mesh selected, I'm going to uncheck this new vertex groups, and I'm going to check bone envelopes, and I'm going to tell you what that means in just a sec. Basically, it's a different way of having a bone influence a mesh so that you don't get the automatic weights confused between two sets of bones. Okay, so now I can go ahead and select this face set of bones. So I'll select the face rig, and if I rotate the head, nothing much should change. But now if I select any of those face bones and I go into pose mode, I should now be able to move the bones, and it's going to stretch a little bit of the mesh. And it's not doing that because we press Control P, or it's not doing it because of automatic weights. It's because every bone has a natural envelope, a kind of distance around it that will suck in or control any of the vertices in the controlling mesh with an armature modifier. Now, how do you adjust that little zone or that little force field around the bone? Well, what you can do is you can go to the armature tab or the object data tab, and with any of those bones selected, and you can go down to the display section and display the bone not as this octahedral, I'm not sure how to say that, octahedral shape. You're going to display as an envelope shape, and when you do, you can see how the bone looks now, but you can see that little white or highlighted area around the bone, and that's where its envelope is. That's called the envelope. How do you adjust each bone's envelope? Well, you can go to that individual bone, and you can go to the bone tab, and you can go all the way down to the deform section where you can change the envelope distance, okay? Now this moves very fast when you drag it, so you can hold shift and drag it, and that will give you more precision. So I'm going to go ahead and make that bone distance maybe 0.4. You can type in those areas manually and press enter. Same thing over here, I'll try 0.4. And now all I have to do is move the bone, and I can get some more control and some more distortion to that character's eyebrow. So I don't think 0.4 is quite big enough. I'll try 0.5. You can see this is very customizable. You can add more bones on the fly even after you've started working with it. So I'm going to try actually 0.7, sure, and let's press Alt-G to clear out that bone's Alt-G. Oh, it already is actually in the right position. If I put it over here, if I press Alt-G, it'll snap it back to its original location. This one was at 0.7. I'll try 0.7, and let's see how that one works. That's looking pretty good. If I want to adjust the nose now, I can do that. What I might want to do here, instead of increasing the overall distance, what I can do is I can increase the size of the head and the tail and play around with these, including the weight, but then I can increase that a little bit. If I just increase the distance, it might affect too much of the face. So now if I grab that bone, I'm pulling on mostly the face. I might decrease the tail a little bit, just so I'm not grabbing between the character's eyes, and I'll play with that, and you can adjust it to your heart's content. Now, if you don't like looking at your character like this, neither do I, that's okay. What you can do is you can change these bones to display back as just normal octahedral shape, or even just as little stick bones or bee bones or wire bones even. I'll leave them as stick bones, and you don't even have to have this outer shell mesh displaying. I can tap H to hide it, so now I can see my character more naturally. I can grab these bones and play with the squash and stretch of my head, so I can really give my character some expression. So you can see how powerful the Mesh Deform tool really is here, but there's even one more way that you can use it. You can use it to easily add clothing and have that clothing deform correctly around a character. You see, normally if you were to add a mesh, let's say a t-shirt around this character, if you were to parent with normal automatic weights to the character's same bones, what might happen is if you don't have the weight painting correctly done on the t-shirt to the same sort of levels and weight painting that you have the character's mesh, if you, let's say, bend the character's arm, the character's skin might poke through the clothing. Well, that won't really happen, or it's much more unlikely to happen if you're using the Mesh Deform modifier as we are right now. In fact, this is how they added clothing to the main character in the Blender Open movie Sintel. They used a whole outer mesh with the Mesh Deform modifier over her entire body in order to make her clothing stay on her and deform just as her normal bones do. So they didn't actually just parent a mesh to bones with automatic weights or any weights. They used the Mesh Deform modifier. Let's quickly go and add a t-shirt on this character. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the mesh. In fact, I'm going to select the face bones, press A a few times, and Alt-G to clear their location, Alt-R and Alt-S to clear their rotation and scale. Of course, you can scale things as well. So if you want to make a character whose like tummy rumbles and because he's hungry or something like that, you could do that. If you want to make a character's head stretch out because they're falling really fast and you're practicing stretch and squash animation principles, then you can add more of these controller bones all around your character, which is great. Let's go ahead and make a quick t-shirt. I'm going to go into my character's edit mode. I'm going to go to my front view. I'm going to turn off limit selection to visible, and I'm going to press B to box select. I'll press A to make sure nothing is selected. B to box select. I'm going to select all of these faces. Great. And I'm going to duplicate them, Shift D, and then I'm going to right click, and so now I have two of all those faces, and I'll press P to separate selection. So P brings up the separate menu. I don't know why it's P, it just is when you're in edit mode, and I'll select selection there. So now I've got a separate t-shirt object. What I can do now is go back into object mode, select the t-shirt object. I'm going to give it a simple color. Let's go ahead and switch to the cycles render engine, and I'll click on use nodes. I'll just make the t-shirt, red, and I'll go into material view. And the character has the same color, so I'll just give my character, let's make my character a little bit blue. Okay, so I've got that t-shirt. It's the same size as the character. I'm going to add what's called and I'm going to get rid of actually its two modifiers for now, but I will add the subsurf modifier. Sure, that'll make it round. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the solidify modifier, and if you don't know how to use that, I'll put a link to that on the screen right now. I have a video of that that I made quite a long time ago. The solidifier modifier lets you make things have thickness. So what I can do is after I've added it, I can increase the thickness. In fact, I might want to do it negatively, and I'm going to turn off or turn on some offset a little bit. I'm not going to do this very well in the span of this video, but there is my t-shirt. In fact, I'm going to give him, or the t-shirt, a hole in the bottom. Let's turn limit selection to visible back on, and I'll select those and X and delete those faces. And so now I've got a hole in the bottom of my t-shirt. That's good. Let's go ahead and check out how this works. It doesn't, because what I need to do now is apply or add the mesh deform modifier to my t-shirt and point to that same deform mesh. I just need to make sure that this t-shirt is still within the deform mesh. So I'm going to press Alt H to unhide. Alt H is unhide. I find, by the way, that Alt H does not work if you have a bone selected. So if you were to hide this and then have a bone selected in edit mode and press Alt H, it doesn't unhide meshes for some reason. So make sure you have another mesh selected to unhide meshes. I think that's a little bit of a bug in Blender, but so be it. So the t-shirt does fit, it looks like, inside this outer shell object. So all I have to do now to make it deform with the mesh is add that same mesh deform modifier to it, and then point to that same deform mesh and then click bind. And once I've done that, again, it was super fast, I can go ahead and animate my character, and the t-shirt will deform it just like the character, and I can give him some expressions by moving around these little controller bones. And as you can see, we can easily pose our character's facial expressions and the body, and everything works great, except we have one or two outstanding issues. What am I talking about here? Well, if I want to render out my scene right now, we're going to have some problems. If I go up to my camera tab and I press render, we're not going to see what we expect to see. We're going to actually see, I have not moved my camera at all yet, so it's not a very good camera angle, but we're going to see the deform shell mesh and not our character, because yes, it is still a mesh in our scene, and we may have hidden it, but we have not told it not to render. And there's a problem with our deform meshes not displaying when we render out. So I'm going to press escape on my keyboard, and I'm going to select the deform mesh. Yes, it's in wireframe mode, and even if I press H on my keyboard, that will hide it from the display in my viewport, but it's still rendering out. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to press Alt H on my keyboard. Alt H will unhide everything that's right now hidden, so now I can see the deform mesh shell again, and I'm going to go up to my outliner window. This is the window that actually lists everything that's in your scene. You'll notice that if I select the deform mesh, which it is right now, it's not displaying in this outliner because it's a child of something else. It's a child of the armature object. So I have to expand that armature object, and now you can see this deform mesh object. And in order to make it not show up in the render, I have to click on this little render camera button and make it grayed out. And so now when I go and press render under the camera tab in the properties window, you can see that it does not show up. But we have another problem, and our problem is not just the fact that my scene does not look good because I don't have any lights in the scene and I don't have my camera at a good camera angle. The other problem is, I'm just going to quickly go to my camera view with the 0 key on my number pad. I have to turn my screencast keys back on here. And if I go and check this lock camera to view button, I can now quickly adjust my camera. We're going to see that when we render out, the character is not at all posed. And this is happening because I have some of my modifiers in the wrong order in their modifier stacks. Specifically, I have, if I go ahead and select the character mesh, I have the mesh deform modifier below other deforming or mesh changing modifiers in the modifier stack. This subsurf modifier adds more geometry to a mesh. It makes all the polygons quadrupled, or in this case, every polygon becomes 8 polygons because it'll split each polygon or face into 4 or potentially even 16, I guess, polygons to smooth it out. And the mesh deform modifier does not know how to deal with that. So what I have to do is actually unbind the mesh deform modifier, and then I have to move it up the modifier stack. So anything that's happening to the mesh by any other modifier happens after or below it on the modifier stack. So I can just press this little down arrow to move the subsurf modifier down, and then I can rebind the mesh to the deform mesh using this modifier, but I need to repose all of the bones in my scene. So I'm going to select one of these main armature bones in pose mode. I can press A a few times to select them all. I'll press Alt-R, Alt-G, and Alt-S. That is repose. The face bones are still in not their default poses, so I'm going to, in fact, I'll break out of my camera view and zoom on in so you can see this better. I'm going to select one of the face bones, press A a few times to select them all in pose mode, Alt-R, Alt-G, and Alt-S to clear out the rotation, location, and scale. So now I'm ready to go ahead and rebind the main character mesh to the main shell, the deform object, and it will work from this point forward. So I'm going to select that mesh, and with the deform mesh modifier under the wrench tab, I'll click on bind again. Again, that will just take a second or two depending on your computer and the complexity of the mesh. And we can't forget about the t-shirt, because the t-shirt also uses the mesh deform modifier, and in this case it is happening after or below some other mesh deforming modifiers like solidify and subsurf. So again, I have to unbind that, move it up the modifier stack so it's happening first, and then subsurf and then solidify, and then I can click bind again because all of my bones are reset already. So I can click bind, and now all should be good in the world. I should be able to rotate my head and pose the character's facial features and stretch him out in any way that I like. And yes, I can go ahead again and select the outer deform mesh and hide it. And if I want to see just my character's face, I could hide just the head bone or all of the armature bones if I wanted to, and I can work with the face. And I should now be able to go back through my camera view and zoom out a little bit and go to my camera tab and press render. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like. Yes, it looks like my character is posed. His head is bent a little bit, and he's looking kind of at me in a funny way. But that will be it for this video. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button below this video on YouTube. It really helps me out. And if you want to see more videos like this one in Blender and in Tech, click on that subscribe button as well. Check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/borncg. On that page, I post updates and news about what I'm working on next, and often sneak peeks. Check me out there. But that'll be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.